Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Healing America's Narratives podcast. I'm your host, King, joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
Doing well, King. Good to be with you here on Wednesday morning. And before you ask, I'll let you know that I'm operating. I'm coming in with all cylinders firing, with a spiritual energy of 10 out of 10. So it's good to be here with that kind of energy.
Excellent. Great to see you here with the kind of energy. I'm at you at 10, and at 10, I'll go into, I'm living with gratitude too, which is a segue into my gratitude list. And I realize gratitude is a state, and that's the state I'm living in on a daily basis. And I just see wonderful things truly happening. Like when you really lean into your list, like I'm grateful for my sight, I'm grateful for my hearing and my ability to walk, talk, stand, breathe, and have a sound mind. I'm grateful for another 24 hours to be alive and to understand that life is the journey and living daily, one day at a time, really is a goal. I used to always hear that, but I'm grateful for understanding that now. I didn't never apply it and say, yeah, that sounds great, but I always had my mind in the future constantly until I finally understand that the future doesn't exist. I mean, that's a vision in your mind, but that's not the real. The only thing that's real is right now. And when you truly understand that, you truly should, and then you get grateful for the things that I just listed: roof over my head, the internet, technology is where it is. Grateful for all those things, and that just really puts you in a state of gratitude, and that's what I'm grateful for.
Yeah, beautiful. And when you said that, you recognize that gratitude is a state, the part of my mind that I don't have immediate control over, that I have to, monitor, basically said, well, if gratitude is a state, we have to see if we can give it 300 electoral votes and make it part of the presidential election next time. So if we had everybody in a state of gratitude, I think the country would be in better shape. So
I meant mental state. That's
yeah.
that's what I was referring to.
Oh no, I knew exactly. I know what you meant. I'm just saying that's what my mind took.
Okay.
I knew. No, it was. You were very clear in what you were talking about, but my reptilian brain stem still has some control, and I have to just wrestle it to the ground. So anyway, in terms of gratitude, I'm grateful for a beautiful, clear blue sky today. I'm grateful for the indoor plumbing that I've taken advantage of already today, both in terms of running water in the kitchen and a flushing toilet in the bathroom. I have a refrigerator that's run by electricity with fresh food in it, a roof over my head, an old cat that's hanging in there. That's like about 18 years old. This cat is, and God bless him, limping around and just doing what the instincts tell him to do. And just that I get to talk about and write about and read about and go about my day according to things that I value, that are important to me, including beyond being on this podcast with you. So I'm just deeply grateful for my basic needs being met, and at a higher level for my my sense of purpose in the world. I'm allowed to really navigate my sense of purpose in the world. So I'm grateful for all of that.
Absolutely. That's excellent to hear. That's excellent to hear. So one last thing before we get into our topic for today. Tell me something good. Actually, tell me something great.
Yeah. So, well, just something it's on the kind of gross physiological level, but I'll tell you something great. So I had, as you know, I was wearing a heart monitor for 2 weeks because of some things I felt in my heart a while back, and I got the test results back yesterday, and my heart seems to be normal, and the little perceptions of a skipped heartbeat were just normal things that were explained to me in the test results, and I'm sure I'll have a doctor actually say them to me in another few days. But so that's really good news for me, because I had a little bit of healthy anxiety around whether or not my heart was going to keep beating at my age. So that's good news.
That's great news.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, but gratitude for sharing that. So with that being said, let's walk us into our topic for today's show.
Yeah. So what we're going to do today, based on a conversation you and I had last week or the last couple of weeks, I'm going to begin to share the general idea of development, adult development in particular, because we've been speaking for 3 years now using this accurate but still brief shorthand for development, a focus on being concerned just with me or with us, meaning my group, or with all of us, meaning all humans, or with all that is, meaning the universe, creation, however you want to describe that. And that's, again, an accurate but somewhat simplified shorthand that captures the essence of what numerous developmental researchers have been doing for the last going on 60 years now in longitudinal studies. So I'm going to actually put a slide up here, a slide deck. And let me just get this.
While you doing that, is
okay. So it is my I don't know on my end, but is this screen being shared here?
No, let me add it to it. It's being shared now.
Okay, great. So what this is just a sample of some developmental language that most people will be familiar with already. As it gets towards the middle of it, maybe not so much, and the very bottom is new. But if we take how the world is as conventional, the mainstream view of things, what came before it was pre-conventional, and what will come after it is post-conventional. So let's just say back in 1776, the conventional worldview of the colonies was that they wanted to fight back against what they thought was unfair rule by Great Britain. Previously, they had been accustomed to that. That's how things were. A king or a queen told you what to do. That was pre-conventional. But the convention at the time said, all right, we want to try to develop a democracy. And then what has happened since then, post 1776, would have been post-conventional then. So that's just some general language. More specific, if we speak about from a scientific standpoint or even from a cultural standpoint, modernity is the time in history that brought us science and reason, and any time before modernity was pre-modern. And then there was the modern period, and then maybe 150 years ago there was a postmodern period began, and then now available to us is a postmodern period. So this is just the type of language that's involved in development. There's a thing, there's what preceded the thing, and there's what follows the thing. An easier way to see it is if we look at how human beings, how human societies operated. Our earliest ancestors that were, human, were hunter-gatherers or hunting foragers, and they were gradually replaced by horticulture, meaning we would plant things and tend to them with little shovels and sticks and hoes. And then agriculture, once we put a plow behind an ox, we could develop more food than we could just with horticulture. And then industry came along and changed how we operated as human beings. And then the informational and now the digital age has come along. So that's an example of societal or economic development, from hunting, gathering, or foraging, to horticulture, to agriculture, to industrial, to informational. Some researchers have used descriptive language because of how people thought during those time periods. And I'm now down in that fourth level, moving from archaic to not being aware of anything really, or having limited consciousness, to a magical worldview, not knowing how the world really worked and thinking the moon was following you when you walked along the prairie at night because the moon was just always there, not knowing what the moon even was, to mythic worldviews that were based in stories that people began to tell about how the world is that weren't based in fact, to a rational worldview, which was fact-based, or and still is, to a pluralistic worldview that basically said the rational worldview was limited because it was given to us by white European men, and then to an integral worldview, which looked back at all the other worldviews and honored what they contributed and saw how they fit together. I'm going to skip the next one that says impulsive, egocentric, etc., and just go down to the colors at the bottom, and then I'll be quiet and let you kind of comment. So the model we're going to look at will use language like instinctive survival, moving into tribalistic, animistic, to egocentric, exploitive, to absolutist or saintly, to materialist, achiever, to relativistic, sociocentric, to systemic, integrative, to globalist. And the model is actually called spiral dynamics, or spiral dynamics integral in its later iteration. And they use spiral dynamics because the actual name that it was given when they were doing the research and after they did the research was the emergent cyclical double helix model of adult biopsychosocial spiritual systems development, which nobody liked to say out loud. So that's it. So I'm just going to stop there. We can leave the slide up as you respond, because that way you can refer to it. But I'm just interested to see you. This is an introduction to some developmental language across various disciplines.
Well, first of all, I love it. So gratitude for choosing a interesting topic, because my interest is human development as it is, and human behavior, understanding that. So this topic interests me, and it interests me from this perspective. I look at it from how, as each stage from pre-conventional to cosmos, right? You see that the awareness had to grow as well. So that's why you look at the instinctive survival, tribalistic, animalistic. So those go hand in hand as the development stage, so that that section, those behavior traits, to the point where it became globalist. And that's because of language and the ability to communicate and travel and all those things creates that need and that intention, and then that intention gets manifested. So I'm looking at it in that context. And I also look at it from a context of understanding where human society is, and then kind of where we are within behaving that way. Like, that's the intentionality, but I think that's where the governments come into play and prevent that from being carried out. Like, we want to be in a globalist mindset and live in that world now, and that mindset. Like, I don't see myself as a United States citizen. When I travel the world, even though I am a United States citizen and I'm proud to be a United States citizen, what I'm saying is I don't limit my thinking to that and lead with that in my identity, to the point where I can't go travel the world and enjoy other people's cultures without looking at it from a context of I'm a United States citizen. I mean, that's this country I'm born in, but my mind, I'm global in the way that I move and talk to people and interact with cultures, and look forward to learning how new cultures are learning new cultures, and then how they engage when they're facing the same or similar economic and governmental policy challenges in each country. But seeing how they handle those differently is interesting. And again, I think everybody's, from a intention standpoint, has a globalist mindset. It's just how we get prevented from doing that. And that's, I think, is the point we've always talked about all through these podcasts, is that at the end of the day, you say majority of Americans feel this way. But same thing, majority of people in the world feel a tendency and desire to want to connect and engage in trade and communication and build that vast network. Technology now gives us the capability of doing it. I mean, I can hop on a call, and I have, all within 1 week, and I've traveled to France, Germany, England, just utilizing technology. So that desire to connect and see yourself and be a globalist in your thought process has to not only benefit you from a context of mind growth as a human being and what you're capable of learning and building as a network and building other people, deeper connections with other folks. That to me is what I love about this. And it gives that understanding of where we should be. That all that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And one of the, I just want to speak to the colors a little bit and tie it back to what you were saying about globalists. So one of the reasons there are colors here, and I'm looking I'm looking at the the next to last segment here where it says instinctive survival, tribalistic, then egocentric. Um, Loosely, those colors should be beige, purple. Egocentric, exploitive looks a little bit orangey, but it's red. Absolutist, saintly is blue. Materialist is orange. Relativistic is green. Systemic is yellow, and globalist is turquoise. It's not the same as the absolutist, saintly. And the reason the colors are useful is these titles can be really misleading. In other words, to really get into the nuts and bolts of each of these levels of development, we have to go past the 2-word or 1-word names of them. I mean, you've zeroed in on globalists, and that makes perfect sense. And that means way more than we normally think it means in terms of this developmental model. Just to give you a sense of it, the majority of people on the planet, the vast majority of the people on the planet today, live in egocentric, absolutist, and materialist and relativistic. And if we look at the political parties, it's red, blue, orange, and green. A tiny fraction of people live at yellow, systemic, integrative, and almost nobody lives at globalist, in terms of what these really mean. So again, the language can be kind of slippery here. So with your permission, I can go on to the next slide, or I can, you can comment on that, and we can go on to the next slide when we're ready.
Well, yeah, I would just make this comment on that. Is that, and I get that, I understand that, and that makes sense. I guess I was looking at it from my perspective that my intentionality would be from within that framework would be the globalist, because I can see where, within our society and within people that I meet, the egocentric is exploitive. I mean, that's our current president. That's our current culture here in America. That's America's mentality to me, as far as I'm looking at it from that perspective. So that's just my own thing. I get what you're saying, and I agree that it's broader than what I was saying. But go ahead.
You were actually really clear, and I think it's important to say this because I've known you for over 3 years now. We've been talking on a regular basis, and you said it specifically that your intentionality is globalist, and that's absolutely true based on my knowledge of you. So I'm not challenging that. My sense, though, is there are lots of people on the planet, lots of people in this country, who do want to live a peaceful life, and they go to work and they raise their kids and they're good people, but they don't have a globalist. They're not even close to a globalist view. Some of them live in an absolutist or saintly view. They believe in God and their particular religion, and they're good people. Some believe in a materialistic or achiever view. They just want to make a lot of money. They're not necessarily religious, but they believe in law and order, and which allows them, if they obey the law, they can go out there and make a lot of money. That's really different from a globalist view. So there are good. I guess my point is, even at the egocentric view, you can be healthy and good. So none of these views is bad. They're just earlier in development than others. Every one of them can be healthy or unhealthy, and we'll get into that a little bit.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, great slide.
Yeah. So this is just another look at the same general knowledge. And important to say, we're looking at development going from the bottom, which is the earliest development, archaic, up to the top, which is holistic or holonic. And I just want to just show these again so that the archaic, and basically the archaic, that's our earliest ancestors who really didn't have language yet, who were, walking the earth and responding to their lives and their consciousness according to physiological needs, trying to stay dry when it rained, not understanding what the rain was, but there's water coming from the sky. And basically the equivalent of that today is people who are, basically infants. A newborn infant is archaic. Some people would disagree with that because of the potential of a newborn infant. But left to its own devices, a newborn infant dies on its own. It has no way to navigate its physiological needs. It needs to be held and touched. It needs to be fed. It needs to be cleaned. So that's archaic. Magic, the earliest humans, before they had any sense of science, didn't understand what they were experiencing. And this is not a criticism of them. It's just what was true. So they began to make up little stories in their tribes or their clans. This was true on every continent where there were human beings. Some people think of the word tribe and they think of Native American or they think of African. Every continent had their tribes early on. And they made stuff up, right? Which makes perfect sense. But they were tribes. They were small groups of people. That was followed by a movement into, once language emerged, where people began telling larger stories and writing emerged, and you could write some of them down. So we got the beginnings of the Hindu scriptures in India, the Jewish scriptures in the Middle East, the Christian scriptures also in the Middle East, the Muslim scriptures also in the Middle East, and people began telling big mythic stories about the world. And then Galileo, Copernicus, and others began to look through their telescopes and challenge some of the myths of the religions. We have the rational scientific view. And then, within the last 150 years or so, some women and other people and people of color began looking at the rational scientific or modern model, said, yeah, that's all white guys from Europe. And then from America as well, telling that story. There's some other stories. There's more of a pluralistic view of the world. And then the integral and the holonic came along, and I'll say more about them in the next slide. But basically, the people on the planet now who have power and who are being hurt by that power are living in magic, mythic, rational, and pluralistic worldviews, pre-modern and modern worldviews. And we'll get into the nuts and bolts of that on the next slide.
I see exactly that. To me, the framework explains it perfectly, because that gives you an understanding of grace to the people who are living that, because of how far they develop in a mental growth and a spiritual growth, in their soul growth, right? Because to me, I look at everything being about, once you understand energy is everything and everything is energy, it's either an increase or there's a decrease in your actions, your behaviors. Things that increase, that's what you want to lean more towards, so you can stay always increasing. The human is that it's impossible to always stay increasing. So the goal is to get as much increase in life as you possibly can and less decrease. So just with that framework, I want to live at a point of, like I said, globalist. And I know most people don't live there. And I think that's what the problem is. They don't see the benefit, and they live, and they're archaic and magical and mythical without even understanding why and what their experience in life through the victim lens. And then those who even get to the point where they can rationalize it, as you say, so from a scientific standpoint, still doesn't evolve them to the point of being able to connect and create things, and then probably still living within their shadow selves, operating as their primary identity if they're in those lower tiers, is what I'm looking at as well. So that's would be my comments.
Yeah, great. So we're good to go on to the next slide.
Absolutely.
So I'm pretty sure, I'll find out in a second, that the next slide, which for some reason isn't changing here. There we go. So this one is kind of busy. I apologize for that, but I'll go through it one step at a time. It's actually not new. It's just more detailed from what we've been saying. And this is the first slide that specifically addresses spiral dynamics integral. So just a couple of things. You'll see that, again, we're going from the bottom to the top. So the earliest developmental level is that beige level. There are actually at least two more above this turquoise level, but they're not researched enough because nobody has them, so they're not on this slide. But you'll notice that the beige, red, orange, and yellow are all the way to the left-hand margin. And that's because they tend to be self-expressive or individual levels of development. It doesn't mean they don't interact with groups or care about groups, but they tend to have more of a concern with the individual. And then the purple, blue, green, and turquoise are indented from the left-hand margin. That's because they tend to be self-sacrificing or group orienting and more from a we perspective. So there's nothing wrong with I or we when it's healthy, but these particular levels of development tend to go back and forth, and which makes sense. After a while, if you're spending too much time just in yourself and you realize that, you want to go back out into the world and interact with the group. If you're spending too much time under the influence of the group, you can go in and dig a little bit deeper into your own development. So blah, blah, blah. That's an overview. So the instinctive, I'm going to just click on something. There's a thing at the bottom of my slide here, and tell me if anything goes away. Did anything change?
No.
Okay, good. There was a little message at the bottom of my screen, and it was blocking part of the screen, and I just clicked on it and got rid of it. I was afraid I was going to destroy the earth or something. So loosely, about 100,000 years ago, this beige way of being emerged. Again, it was our earliest ancestors before language. They were instinctive, they were survivalist. They may have hung out in very loose bands together, but because they didn't have language yet, it was difficult to communicate. I mentioned infants earlier, but also if somebody has severe, and it's important to say severe here, we're not speaking about, young people or people with Down syndrome or certain types of autism, but people who are severe mental illness, who are institutionalized. Some of them operate at a beige level even today. And again, not speaking about people who are somewhat, differently abled in terms of how their minds work. About 50,000 years ago, our ancestors began to speak to each other. Language began to emerge. It began with grunts and calls, and gradually, and historical linguists or linguistic historians still don't agree in terms of exactly when language emerged in different parts of the world. They're getting closer to it, or how it happened. Think about that. In terms of a grammatically consistent system of language. So these folks at this purple level, which was magical, animistic, or ritual, or tribal, began to emerge around 50,000 years ago. Hold these numbers loosely. These are approximations. And then some members of the tribes began to say, the tribe is holding, and this is modern language now to describe this. The tribe is holding me back. I can go out in the world and have a better life on my own. So that was impulsive. This is up to red now. Egocentric, guiltless, and immediate gratification. I want to get something right now for myself. Um, Now that can be good if we study heroes in war, if we study people who fought against um, oppressive regimes and took great risks to go out and fight against the regime. That's a red energy. So it's really red tends to get a bad rap because it can be very bad. It's also the place of warlords, okay, and gang leaders nowadays, and dictators. But again, any one of these developmental levels can be healthy or unhealthy. That's important to remember. What ended up happening, because purple and red couldn't respond well to a lot of what was going on in the world, and once the major religions, what's known as the axial period, beginning some 2,500 years ago, when Hinduism, in this order, Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, no, I'm sorry, Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam emerged, suddenly you could have these larger groups of people who believed the same things. Back when it was in the purple and magical animistic time, you were mostly, but not only, blood relatives. There were some people you would meet and they would join your clan or you would join theirs, but it was more about blood and geography. With the myths emerging, with the great religions, you could believe the same things as people, that you would never meet, because the religion and the beliefs could travel. So that was, give or take, beginning some 5,000 years ago. Do you want me to take a pause here? I'm up to blue. I can take a pause if that makes sense.
Yeah. I got some thoughts on this. So now I look at it from this way, that this should be what our education system should be using to teach people that as a society, this is how we want to get to. And that should be the agreed upon thing that we vote for. That's what democracy should be, is that what is going to be our, as a society, developmental stage we want to aspire to once we accept that this is the model we want to utilize, that we're going to govern ourselves by. And then it lets you know the level of what to expect from that society. So if everybody votes and they say, well, we want to function at the orange, and this is how I'm seeing it. We function to orange, modern, achievement strategist, self-reliant, success-driven, at 300, basically. That's where we function at. Then how society moves would be better understood. But see, the ambiguity in us not understanding that, this framework, and everybody's just developing at different levels and different stages within society. So there's no common goal to get to. Everybody's just functioning at different levels in society as best they can with the information that they're taught. But then I group it in this context as well. See, for my framework, America, or no, not America, the construct teaches that to be successful in the construct's value system, you have to be maverick. You have to be, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You have to be at John Wayne initially, or that Clint Eastwood, that character who just goes into town and does what he needs to do to get the job done, and be damned who gets in his way, and be damned the consequences. He lives at that he will survive mentality. And that's what gets applauded. That's what gets rewarded and celebrated, written about. But then when your person fails trying to follow that logic and that thinking, then they tell you that it's because of your group, it's because of your tribe that you're in. That's the reason why you fail. Your group is, you can't do it because you're black. You can't do it because you're a woman. That's why you can't do it. So be individualistic with your successes, but then get into your group for the failure. Because your group, you failed because of their tribe that you're thrown into, your class that was created to define you. That's what you're thrown into when you fail. And that's the balance that I see that most people have to juggle in their minds. I call it the civil war in the skull. They're balancing their identity towards that context. Am I maverick or am I part of a tribe and a community? Did I pull myself up by my own bootstraps or am I standing on the shoulders of others? And if we should be looking at being turquoise, and I get that for me is where the commonality should be. That's what I want to live at, when you see and recognize values in others and you connect. And your goal is to connect because you realize quantumly we're all interconnected anyway. So why not get to know one another? If we have to be in the same space, it's better to be of peace and love toward each other and not hate through the lack of communication and misunderstanding. Then I close on this point. I just really can't see, as I look at this, and maybe you can go into it deeper, help me understand, but I don't see the healthy side to red. Because anybody who's impulsive, egocentric, gutless, and immediate gratification, if that's their thinking, if they're behaving in that kind of mentality, their mindset, I don't see the healthy side to that. I see how that benefits them, that individual, but how that doesn't necessarily benefit society if someone's, based on those descriptions, that they're gutless, egocentric. Because that's, to me, our current president fits that completely. I don't see how that could ever be a healthy perspective. So that's my final analysis.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back to, I'll say something really quickly about that red, the thing you just mentioned, but I don't want to spend too much time there because you're accurate with regard to Donald Trump. No, but if you look at the stories, not of every, but of many people who have been successful in the music industry, whether it's rock stars, rap stars, hip hop stars, almost all of them have some impulsive, egocentric, guiltless traits, and maybe not immediate gratification, but some of them had that as well. And that's how they succeeded. They took risks. They broke out of what, and here's the interesting part. This is what, I hesitated doing this because there's so much to this. We're looking at a few words on a slide. Here's an important piece. Back when red emerged some 10,000 years ago as a way of being in the world, it was the leading edge of development. So ignore everything above red for a second. Make believe it's not there. When red emerged as a way of being in the world, this impulsive, egocentric, I'm going to break away from the tribe, that was the highest level of development available. It was letting go of the rituals and magic of purple. Now, the problem we face, problem in quotation marks, I'm doing air quotes here where I'm sitting, the problem we face today is that all of these levels of development, and there are 8, I believe, on this slide, these are all active today. So somebody, and I don't want to say this, but go back then to describing orange and green, because we didn't get there yet. So someone like Donald Trump, who has this unhealthy iteration of impulsive, egocentric, guiltless, immediate gratification, he plays that out with access to and in a world that's ruled by orange and blue. He has access to modern technological tools of warfare. He has access to, and he manipulates people who are traditional Christians. So it's one thing when red was the highest level of development to be red. And it could be healthy or unhealthy back then. But it's another thing now when we look at what's possible beyond it to think it's only unhealthy. But it really can be healthy, especially when somebody with a red value system is living in a world where blue, orange, and green are the power structures. Mainly orange and blue are the power structures in the world. You could argue Europe is more green, postmodern, but the most powerful of these value systems is only about 300 years old. Some people could say 500 years ago. You can debate when science and modernity emerged between 300 and 500 years ago. That's a relatively new way of being in the world, and it is by far the most powerful. It has most of the money and most of the weapons in the world, the modern worldview. So let me just go quickly through orange and green and say something about that first tier line, and then I'll shut up and hear what you have to say. So after these mythic religions, and they were primarily religions, and some empires began to emerge in blue. All right, because large empires began to emerge on the globe as well. People, mostly men, but not only men, began to develop what we now call the modern worldview and began to use evidence and science and challenged religion. And for a few hundred years, science won that fight. They just knocked. Religion continued, but in terms of religion explaining the world to people, science kicked religion's ass for some years. So that's the orange modern worldview. The orange modern worldview wrote the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights. That rather than there was this monarchy, this authoritarian blue way of being in the world that told everybody what to do, the people, and we know it wasn't perfect, but a modern, strategic, self-reliant worldview wrote the U.S. Constitution and then gave us modern science and everything that's come after that, from the Industrial Revolution to the digital revolution to the atomic bomb to modern warfare. All of that is orange. So you can hear the healthy, unhealthy parts of orange. What Ken Wilber calls the dignity and disaster of any one of these worldviews. And then somewhere in the middle of the, we could say in the early 20th century, the very late 19th century, people, a lot of them were women, and a lot of them were people in color, began pushing back on the modern strategic worldview, basically saying, there's some other stories behind your modern science and your U.S. Constitution, because look at what that orange worldview did to Africans. Look what it does to women, enslavement, subjugation. Look what it did to indigenous peoples. So the postmodern worldview pushed back and said, there are a lot of stories, not just the white European male stories. And that gave us women's rights. It gave us the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in the 1960s, and a lot of other things. I'm just doing this really quickly. So here's the last thing I'm going to say. So all of these first 6 worldviews, from beige up to green, share one trait. And that's that each of them is sure that they're right. In beige kind of doesn't really play into this because they're instinctive and survivalist. But the rest of them believe that they're right and that all of the other ones are wrong. So green looks down at orange, blue, red, and purple and says that they just don't get it. Orange looks at green and thinks that they're naive and weirdos and voodoo, and they all just critique each other. They think they've got the right thing. So each new level of development thinks that they've solved everything. And obviously we know that that's not true. So I'll stop there. And then I hope that helped a little bit, that little kind of fleshing it out a little bit more.
Yeah, it did. It did. So much. And so that I see we look at it from different lenses. Like you look at it from a worldview context and human development over history as well. And I get that. And I'm looking at it more from the lens I'm speaking through is from my perspective of the people I know in the world today. And I see people at every level in the world today of this. And that's how I'm speaking from only within that context of it are my answers based in. And now, so in other words, I know people in my old neighborhood or in my current neighborhood in my family who are have an instinctive survivalist mindset, right? So I think that's an excellent description to describe how they are. And once you understand where people are within a framework such as this, then that helps you understand that which one of these you want to be in yourself and operate. Because you're right, everyone's going, each one of them going to think theirs is the best. But I think in the second tier, being the second tier shows growth in the context that, yeah, that's where humankind should be in order for it to survive. It has to be there. The majority of people's thought process and hopes and plans and intentionality should be at turquoise, holistic. And as much as that, I think that most of the world would be happier with that. That's with the intention. But people don't, what I'm saying is they don't operate with the goal of moving and advancing up through these tiers to get to holistic, where if we had holistic, the world would be a better place. But the world is now ruled by the minority. The minority wants to put us in the constant red, orange is how I see it. And within that, they're going to use whatever tactic it is to be success driven. And as I define that, is that's what they show you as success is money. And they tell you that's what they value. The construct says they value success and value money. And then you look at the people who have the most money. Elon Musk, who would trade their lives for Elon Musk's life? He's the richest man in the world. You want his money, but you don't want his life, right? He doesn't have love in his life. He doesn't. So the richest man in the world, they tell us he's the highest at the tier top of what we should be aspiring to. If you're looking at it from a capitalistic, individualistic, pull yourself up by your bootstraps mindset, he's achieved it. And his lifestyle, his family's not close. He's hated by most of the world. Personally, he destroyed that. He could easily been loved by most of the world if he just chose a different set of actions, but he chose to lean in more to his shadow elements of who he is and identity of race and hate, red, and that's what gets celebrated. And that's what this whole, to me, Donald Trump represents. He is a movement of men who are in that red space. That's his, or a part of his mega base. And a lot of them had the ability to grow and over social media and grow that mindset. And they fed into that. And Donald Trump represents that very well. I mean, when you remove, if he's not targeting you personally, so if you're a white male, he's not personally targeting you, you can look at him as a hero. If you're going to be in that mindset of, I got to go for myself, it's immediate gratification, it's all mine. With the rappers, as you say, talk about as well. I mean, they're talking about the same thing. But then it also shows you the tragedy of that. As you talk about that, Tupac dies, Biggie dies, the ones who really were successful at that, showing you what they were doing, so egocentric, guiltless, immediate gratification. And that became the culture of rap, where I grew up, and rap was everything. Rap was political. Rap was partying. Rap was just Will Smith parents just don't understand. It wasn't that level, but that got turned into that because, again, the construct likes to divide people, and they begin to only promote one rap and hip hop as one culture. And that's what gets sent around the world, is that when you think about hip hop, you think about it from that context. That's all it is. And that's not what it was. So then I look at the blue and mythical. That's the church, basically. That's how I looked at in that for my framework. That's the church folks. And they're going to be having the authoritarian views of how the group centric is ran and governed from a spiritual context, and trying to establish spiritual values and governance over how people practice their understanding, their connection to the universe through God. But then all of them have their issues, and the more wars have been fought over religion than for any other reason in the world. So I just look at it as an excellent way to analyze the world through what I consider a fully human perspective, if I put myself in that context. And it's an excellent way to categorize people, and that's a system engineering me. I can easily begin to categorize people in my life that I know and put them into these categories to help me understand how not to take it personal, but just that's where they're thinking, that's where their mindset is. So
Yeah. So great. So what I want to do is I want to close off just making 2 or 3 final points about this, because we could spend a lot more time. And again, I want to reiterate that this slide and the previous slide isn't spiral dynamics integral. It's an overview of each of the levels, but it doesn't really get into the nuts and bolts of each one. So first point I want to make is that on average, for people who really work at their own development, these aren't things you can choose. These are things that, your way of seeing the world shifts. And for people who really work at this and involves meditation and means understanding, the research shows that it takes 6 to 10 years to move from one developmental worldview to another. Now, I was born basically into a blue mythic worldview, God and country, Roman Catholic, United States of America. And blue, it can primarily be about religion, but it's also about nation. You have the same mythic, authoritarian, group-centric, traditional view of your country. Many people do around the world, not just in the US. So blue isn't just religion, but it tends to be religion and nation. But the point I want to make, though, is these aren't things you say, okay, I want to be blue, or I want to be green, or I want to be turquoise. Want to be doesn't matter. You can kind of understand the levels, but to really live in a level, and you can't skip one. You can't go from blue to yellow. You can't go from purple to orange. You do not skip. You can't skip in development. You need to grow through each developmental level. Some people do it more quickly. Some people do it more slowly. Nobody can skip. Right. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll probably take the slides down so we can begin to bring this to a close, because I'm kind of monitoring the time here. Right now, a high-level view of the United States. And again, think that these can be healthy or unhealthy levels of development. So green, orange, blue. They're not, none of these are automatically good or bad. They just are. Moderate Democrats and Republicans in the United States basically live, on average, in a healthy orange view. That's the center of gravity. There's no doubt about it. At the extremes of the right in the United States, the MAGA Christian right, that's unhealthy blue, where they're pushing this mythic, authoritarian, group-centric, traditional view. And at the extremes of the progressive or democratic left is the green postmodern view, the people who did use wokeism and critical race theory as a weapon, who tried to bludgeon people. You're not woke enough. That's the unhealthy green. And the problem we're faced with now is we have a guy and several people with him running the whole show who inherited a lot of wealth from his orange father, but he basically moves through the world in red. So Donald Trump is this impulsive, egocentric, guiltless guy who just wants to win every moment. He manipulates the mythic, authoritarian blue people in order to win in an orange game with the military and the nations and the money, and to, basically mock the green. That's again, that's a gross oversimplification, but it's an accurate assessment. So the soul of America is being navigated through green, orange, and blue value systems, and being led by a guy who operates at unhealthy red. So that's why it's such a mess now, because all of these are around, and people don't know they have developmental worldviews. The leaders who really who are promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, who understand critical race theory, most of them don't know developmental levels. They're really good in their fields, but this is the missing thing. And some of them, again, the people who are at green would just push back against it. because they don't want to be told there's something beyond where they are. They want to be the final word, and they're simply not. Because the people at yellow can look at all of these green, orange, blue, red, purple, and beige and see their usefulness and their function when they emerged in human history, and see their goodness in their healthiest iteration. All right, this yellow, integrated, flexible, functional sees the value of green at its best, of orange at its best, of blue at its best, but also can call them out at their worst. And there are very, very few people living in the second tier at yellow or turquoise. So I'm going to be quiet now because I know we're close to finishing. Okay if I take down the screen?
Well, no, hold on. I just
want
to make this comment about it. I understand what you're saying, and I don't necessarily, from which we've talked about, and you said so much more to it. Granted, I give it that. I'm just saying from what we discussed so far, and from my understanding of it, I look at it as, I interpret it as identity. So if a person's identity, and I'm looking at it, my identity, you can change your identity as you grow, and you should. Now, I don't see how someone can say I'm locked into green, because unless they have an opportunity to listen to what my perspective is. And I'm really aware of for me, my identity as it ranks in these tiers. And I operate intentionally there, not to say I'm superior to anybody. I'm just saying that can be achieved, is what I believe. I don't believe that it takes, Donald Trump can change if he wanted to. He could be a better person. Now, will he? No, he could. I mean, so that's my point. That's all I wanted to say. Is just that I hear what you're saying, and I'm not arguing your framework and the logic of that. I'm just saying that for me, I look at it as identity. And within that identity, it's a description of your perspective. Like, I'm never going to be a person who just sees diversity initiative programs and push for that. It's about seeing the humanity in everyone, and that energy and everything is energy. That's bottom line. I really live that mindset. There's no, I want my particular group of people, and that's all I listen to is their perspectives. No, I see the limitation in their thinking, because again, they still believe in a construct. If you're arguing for diversity inside of a construct, you're never going to get it when you understand that it's not in your best interest. It wasn't built for you to have, for the diversity within it, when you understand the system of it. So that's the point. That's the perspective I look at it from, and that's how I analyze it. And I was speaking it from that. But I think it's a great discussion that we've had, and I think it's something that more people should look at, because at the end of the day, we have to begin to look at how we can connect in this world. If not, the world has been destroyed by the minority. So,
yeah, again, there's a lot more we could say about this, but we're at the close to the top of the hour now. So, and I will say that I've been working with this particular model and some others for the better part of, for more than 20 years now. And it's much deeper and nuanced than what appeared on these slides today. And what Clare Graves and Don Beck and Chris Cowan and others, what they were studying, what their research was specifically focused on values, what people value. Because some research is on cognitive development, some is on value, some is on moral reasoning. This was specifically a study of what people valued. So I want to just make sure that that's clear as well. And you might be able to say that, you value based on your identity. I mean, that might be true at some level, but all of these research projects focused on one thing. And in this case, it was on values. That's what they were researching.
Well, I think it's a great slide. I think it's a wonderful discussion. I think it's helpful information, Reggie. I appreciate you saying that. And as we get ready to wrap up our show, any last thoughts you want to share as far as how we move forth? And
well, no, I think for anybody that listens to this, I would say don't think you understand spiral dynamics or any developmental model because of this hour and this handful of slides. Go do some research on development in general, secondary research, study what's out there, look at spiral dynamics if you're interested in it. I picked this one for us to start off because it's been used in the world. It was used in the background as South Africa was making its move from apartheid to democracy. It was used in the background in the United States, I forget which cities now, to help deal with gangs in cities. And it was basically showing people that their differences weren't necessarily about skin pigmentation, but it was more about what they valued. And that's one of the humorous things that came out of South Africa. And, not a big deal based on everything else that took place there. But they found out that when asked about television shows, the Afrikaners, the white people basically from Holland, who had run the country under apartheid for years, one of their favorite TV shows was The Cosby Show, because for them, it represented family values, which they valued, even though it was a black guy in a black family. This is long before the Bill Cosby scandal. And when they spoke to the native peoples, the indigenous peoples of South Africa, the blacks who were there, what their favorite American TV show was Dallas, because they wanted to move into a modern, achievist, successful, self-reliant way of being in the world. In Dallas, it's kind of an unhealthy orange, about the oil people in Texas. But, they had been kept subjugated by the blue apartheid system in South Africa. So they aspired to the next thing. So that's kind of a humor story that came out of the work that Don Beck and others did in South Africa in the background when Nelson Mandela and others were moving that country toward democracy. So I'm going to.
All right. Well, yeah, so we go ahead and get ready to wrap up our show with focusing on ending with lifting up someone who we see as being fully human and either past or present. And so with that being said, Reggie, I'll give you the floor first. Do you have anybody you have in mind that you want to lift up for today's show as example of being fully human as we wrap up?
Yeah. Actually, I'm going to, because I'm unprepared, but I studied with Don Beck, who passed away some years ago now, over the course of about 3 or 4 years. I was in person with him for about 15 days over, probably 3 different trainings. And I'm going to hold him up because he took this body of work, he and a guy named Chris Cowan, developed it further. The primary researcher was a guy named Clare Graves, who was one of Beck's teachers. But Beck was not just a psychologist and a researcher, he was an activist. So he's the guy that took this work. He made over 60 trips back and forth, basically from North Texas, where he lived, to South Africa. And I don't know how many trips he made to different cities in the United States, using spiral dynamics to help people understand that many of their differences were values-based, not race, ethnicity, or skin-based. And he was an interesting character, funny guy, brilliant in his own right. And it was like of all the problems we have with Texas nowadays. I mean, he's from North Texas, and he wore cowboy boots, and he was just a good guy. So I'll just say Don Beck, good guy.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm going to choose, since you mentioned South Africa, I'm going to choose Nelson Mandela. And I'm going to say Nelson Mandela because of the fact that he is an epitome of the word forgiveness. For him to be able to suffer what he suffered, to endure what he had to endure, not only the prison term, 27 years, and destroyed of his marriage to his young, beautiful wife, Winnie, and all the challenges he had to deal with. But prior to that, the uncomfortable of this apartheid period on top of that. And the brutal treatment and the losses. And he came out a man who wasn't about hate, wasn't about getting revenge, wasn't about, and was willing to rebuild a new government with enemies that had imprisoned him. That to me shows forgiveness. That's a level to achieve to. And I honor that. I honor that ability to do that. And that to me is the key definition of seeing things as energy. When you realize that at the end of the day, this is just really a skin suit, and you don't function in the realm of race. Because if you function in the realm of race, you can't forgive that. You got to be able to see that I got to look beyond just my hatred of him as a white man and see that what's in the best interest of the country and what's in the best interest of the world going forward, and what's in the best interest of the country and the world is peace and love, and we can rebuild the economy together. And seeing that from that perspective, that angle, as a globalist, and that decision making to me is something that needs to be honored. I honor him in that respect. So,
yeah, amen.
All right, so we're going to wrap up the show now. Reggie, thank you for choosing such a wonderful topic. I appreciate you being here, being present, bringing values to the conversation. And listen, audience, those who listen to us live or listen to us next week, watch this on the replay. We appreciate you, and we want to all continue to look for ways to be more fully human. Thank you. Until next Wednesday at 10 a.m.